1985, my parents sent me off to spend 5 weeks in Denver, Colorado, with a family called the Hoff family, H-O-F-F. Because Paul Hoff had been to Harvard Business School with my father. And Paul Hoff was a typical rags to riches story because he was a bricklayer's son who joined the US Navy, Naval Academy, I believe. He used to fly in the Navy. So, when you think of people who fly planes, you have a certain impression about them. And then he went on to do his MBA and he was very successful in his business. So he may have had a tough upbringing, he may have been a pilot, he may have been to a cutthroat business school and been a businessman, but he was the softest person that I ever knew. And he was the best mentor any child could have. So in fact, he kind of adopted me. So I used to call him dad, I used to call his wife mom. Unfortunately for me, he passed away very young in 2001. Sudden heart attack walking in New York. So it was very, very sudden and shocking. But he is the one, I would say, the role that perhaps my father could not play at that time for whatever reason. Paul Hoff played. And he would come at least once a year to India to see me. I would go often to see him. So his kids were my friends. I spent a lot of time there, 5 weeks with him in Denver. So he was another life guru like my mother. And I think just in terms of being human and dealing with people in a humane way is what I learned from him. Because in spite of all that he had achieved, he was just, as I say, the nicest and I like to say the softest person ever. Because for me, the most important quality in a human being is softness. I'm not looking for intelligence, ambition, tenacity, stuff like that, even integrity. For me, the most important is softness. In that softness, I think everything resides. And Paul Hoff was that person for me. So in his soft way, for example, he would say to me, in terms of doing something, after I had finished studying, coming back, etc., he would always say, go out on a limb, because that's where all the fruit is. So that was his soft way of pushing me to do something different, to take a risk, to push the envelope, to test the edge, that sort of thing. So I joined in 1990. So the first 5 years I was working at the most junior level possible as an engineer or as a first among equals with engineers. So at that time my interaction with my father was very limited because I was not dealing with issues of strategy, technology, quality, marketing, what have you. It was only from around 94 onwards when I started finding my way into product development, marketing, etc. Then the whole alpha male syndrome begins, right? So, and you're never prepared for it. So then that relationship changes. When I started working here, the one senior person from my father's team, 90% of the people that worked with my father, I personally felt that they were not really with it. And one of the most remarkable was a gentleman called Mr. Jain. So Mr. Jain is now about 87. In fact, he used to come to lunch at 1 o'clock. And so he coached me from a business point of view. So he's the one that helped me understand we should be global, we should do one thing right, put everything behind motorcycles. And the most important thing he told me was that, we may have started scooters with Vespa and we may have started motorcycles with Kawasaki. It was a very simple lesson, but I think it is so important. He said, do you really think you can go through life standing on somebody else's feet? It's not possible. You have to learn to stand on your own feet. Unless, he said, we have no R&D in this company. There's no technology in this company. There's no quality in this company. There's no productivity in this company. So, okay, we did relatively much better than others. But he was talking from a global perspective. He took me around the world. He took me to shows in Italy, in Germany. He took me to Japan. I think I must have been to Japan 50 times, out of which Mr. Jain must have come at least 10 times. Ravi was always there. And he would say, see, this is what is called world class, whether it's in terms of product, the design, the finish, the quality, etc. He used to take me to our dealerships. And I remember one dealership, I will not name it, in Pune. He took me to the workshop. And that same infamous M50 that my brother and I were riding, somebody's vehicle was there. It was lying outside the workshop on the footpath with the engine cover open and with the rain falling into the crankcase. And he said, this is Bajaj. This is, see, customers have no choice. So they accept this. But do you really think this will be accepted tomorrow? But that was the status quo at that time. Everybody thought that was normal. And I'm sure it was not the case only with Bajaj. It was with perhaps every other Indian auto and engineering company. That's why how many of us are world class and are able to export even today. That mindset has not changed by enough. So Mr. Jain is the one who showed me the world, who opened up my eyes. And he said, you have to stand on your own feet. And he said, you're the only one who can do it. He said, otherwise this company is so confident of itself कि हमारे स्कूटर के लिए तो लोग 10 साल रुकते हैं. I'll tell you a funny story for a change. So I have a dear friend called Ajay Patni from Nagpur. He's our dealer. And he still comes and meets me, and I would say I learned a lot from him also. And a couple of other dealer friends of mine. So I used to ask Ajay bhai sometimes. He's not much older than me. Was Bajaj such an arrogant company? Because I knew one thing, that my father was very fair. He never overcharged consumers. That's a very well-known story. He kept the price as low as possible. He treated his people well. He believed in quality. He believed in productivity. He believed in hard work. He believed in being world-class. He always talked about exports. It is not his mistake that he went and did a goddamn MBA at Harvard. I think that was the problem. I firmly believe, because I don't think management is a science you can learn in a classroom. It's a behavior that you learn while you practice a science. That science has to be something else, like engineering or something. So anyway, that is one of our long-standing points of divergence. So coming back to Ajay bhai, so I asked him this, that how can it be that when the man at the top was not arrogant at all, and he genuinely wanted excellence, is it really true the stories I hear? So he said, Rajiv bhai, मैं आपको एक कहानी बताता हूँ. So he said, in my own dealership, one fellow came in one day, scrambled through the door, and he said that, अरे वो मैंने scooter book किया था. So when was it booked? He said 10 years ago, and it was in anticipation of his daughter getting married. That was one of the famous stories about Bajaj. That if your daughter was going to get married in 10 years' time, then this is one of the things you bought for the groom. So he says, I booked it 10 years ago, and I received a letter saying that the vehicle is here. So he said, then what's the problem? But देखिए, on that scooter there is only one rear view mirror. So Ajay bhai says, it's a first hand thing. Ajay bhai says, so what's the problem? So the man showed him the catalog from 10 years ago, it seems. He said, देखिए, ये catalog पे तो 2 mirror है. अब 10 साल बाद, at least you deliver the full scooter, So we used to do anything. Even without spare wheel, we used to ship it out, without a mirror, this, that. And consumers also were keen to get the product and get going. So Ajay bhai says, see what he says to him. He tells him, देखो बंदे, ये scooter पे एक लड़की भी बैठी है. Now are you going to ask me for that also? This is the story of arrogance of a Bajaj dealer in sales. This is the story of arrogance, or whatever you may want to call it, incompetence of a dealer in service. That a automobile is lying with its engine open. And I am telling you, this story is around 1994-95. The country had already opened up. Hero Honda had happened in 82 or 83, if I am not wrong. So had in Suzuki, now TVS Suzuki, or later on, etc., etc. 12 years after that, this was the behavior of the company. That is why Mr. Jain was so important to me. because he was one person who did not get colored by that environment. And I think it's very remarkable. See, today I am working in a certain ecosystem, use such big words. I am totally calibrated and conditioned by it. I will never be able to think outside of it, I'm sure. I don't have that ability. But Mr. Jain had that. I mean, he could think world class at a time when this is the state of affairs. My next great teacher was the Japanese professor Yamaguchi-san. This story though I've told on YouTube a million times. And one of the wonderful things that Yamaguchi-san told us in a certain moment of frustration with us when he was trying to teach us. Every 3 months he used to threaten to leave us because we were useless students. This is from 96 onwards. Till about 2016 he came. 20 years he had to teach us, 20 years Mr. Jain had to teach us. We were that proverbial kutte ki dum, it took a long time to straighten us out. So in his frustration, Yamaguchi-san said once, business starts when the customer says no. This is important to understand. If the scooter is selling, see, my father gets very allergic to this criticism sometimes. Oh, monopoly, waiting period, this, that. Then he reels off a list of 20 companies. Oh, Kinetic was there, TVS was there, Kerala Automobile was there, Andhra Pradesh Scooter was there, Gujarat Narmada was there, this one, Lambretta, Shambretta, all that. Arey, theek hai, all that was there. But the reality is, consumers still waited 10 years, 5 years, 3 years. When I joined the company, there was mild panic in the company in December 1990 because the waiting period was down to 18 months. I cannot conceive of creating a product which has an 18-month period and not celebrating in some part of the world. I mean, imagine if I had that good fortune, which I have never had actually. So, I understood what Yamaguchi-san meant, that really the mindset changes when you have product on the shelf, whether it's a magazine or a motorcycle, and nobody wants to buy it. That is when you have to change, or that's the end. I mean, there's only two choices. So I think that was a period of time when there's no product on the shelf, there's no back pressure from the market at all. So why would anybody listen to Mr. Jain? And I would say I have been in many of those meetings. Without being critical or unkind, I would say that, and I've said this to my father openly, that he only paid lip service to it. In the sense, he would always say, हाँ, Jain जो बोल रहा है, सही बोल रहा है, ऐसा है, वैसा है. वो 5 मिनट का speech हो जाता था. But you know, as Dr. Rajan just told me the other day, my homeopath, the world is not changed by your opinion, it is changed by your action. So what is the action you have taken? That is important. There is no question of taking action. All you have to do was produce more so that you can sell more. So customers are waiting in a queue. So Mr. Jain somehow was, and Mr. Jain and Dr. Wallace said the same thing, which I say, I'm saying this now because it's very embarrassing for me, that they both told my father that this boy is this company's only hope. And that's not something I like to say to people because it gives the wrong picture. But in 1992 or 93, after I had worked for 2-3 years, my father was very keen that I should go to Harvard Business School. Because it's a family tradition. My father, my uncle. So I went there for a day to see what it was like for the experience. But I was not enamored. But anyway, it's horses for courses. So he was very keen that I should go. And I still remember, Dr. Wallace was older than my father. He's still alive in the UK. He's over 90 now. And he was a typical feisty Englishman who my father loved actually. My father only brought him as a consultant to Bajaj in the 80s, even before I was in the company. I remember Dr. Wallace sitting across my father's table in his office, same office. I was sitting next to him and he wagged his finger at my father and he said, if this boy goes to Harvard, there will be no company left by the time he's back. This is what he said. And both he and Mr. Jain, who were there that time, both felt that I was their vehicle for implementing the changes. Because having studied at Warwick, see, there was nothing at all special about me except the exposure I had had. I had been to the Massey Ferguson plant, I had been to the Honda plant at Swindon. I had of course been to all our labs and workshops. I knew what real manufacturing was about, what real quality was about. So I could see that what we were doing is completely mediocre. And that was a great joy for me and a great opportunity because, you see, unlike product development or marketing, where there's a long period of gestation between what you do and the result. I mean, if I start designing something now, it will come out in 3 years' time. With manufacturing, you do something now, you can see the result in 2 minutes. If I reduce the cycle time of a machine by 10 seconds, from 1 minute to 50 seconds, it is producing a job faster the very next minute. So for an engineer, there is nothing more gratifying than to see that something you do in the morning yields a result 1 hour later. So when I started working, my only job in this company actually was to teach others at the age of 23. And that is how I have met some of my most competent colleagues who have risen through the ranks from there, like Ravi or like Joe, like Pradeep, etc., to head the various most important functions. Because if I had not worked ground up, I would never have met the real talent that existed in Bajaj Auto. I would have only met the senior people. The real gems were on the floor, the juniors. And across, not just in production, across all functions. And so that's where then I think at that time I got about 200 people together. And we called it a Streamlined Manufacturing Systems Group, SMS it was called. So I used to be part of that across these two plants we had in Pune and Aurangabad at that time. And they were just engineers who were already working in different departments. I was bringing them in, sharing some knowledge, information, books and articles with them, putting them back and then supporting them. See, everybody knew, even though I was 23 or 24 or 25, everybody knew that quote unquote the boss's son is standing behind this guy. And that's the ironical thing. Everybody knew that we were no good. Everybody knew what we could do was much better. When Dr. Wallace was brought in as head of a consultancy called Coopers and Lybrand by my father, C&L it used to be called, I think they hit their head and they charged us God knows how many hundreds of thousands of pounds, but they could make no improvement because as one of the other senior colleagues of my father called V.M. Rao, who was a brilliant engineer, told me कि हमने तो उनको सब सिखा दिया. Bajaj Auto taught C&L everything and sent them back. There's no question of learning from them. So that's how my father packed off the consultants because he said that I'm only paying you, nothing is happening. He only kept the head of the team, Dr. Wallace, John Wallace, because he had a personal chemistry with him. He became a friend, like a family friend almost. So that's how Dr. Wallace stayed on to try and make a change. And Dr. Wallace used to not say that this can be 10% better. This can be 300% better. It was inconceivable. People used to faint, that if I try to tell the workmen to make something 5% better, they will put the tools down. And this fellow is talking 500% better. They couldn't believe it. When he used to say this paint shop is producing 600 per day scooters, this should be, he used to just take a look at it. I mean, he had that eye. We call it Kaizen eye. One look he could, this should make 2000. And we used to be so excited, as young engineers. And we used to do it. The lines that used to produce, I remember, 128 scooters a shift, if I am not wrong. And because we tried to change it, there was a strike, and when we tried to move output from 128 to I think 150 or 160 and then to 210, it was unheard of in those days. And no Mahindra, no Tata, nobody was doing that kind of stuff. Assembly lines of similar length are today in Bajaj producing 1200 vehicles a shift. Now, where was 100 and something, where is 1200? I mean, a big number I can give you is that around the time I joined, all of Bajaj Auto was about 23,000 people, including a lot of temporary people, contract workers, producing about 923,000 vehicles total in that year. So a little under a million and produced by 23,000 people. Our Pantnagar plant today can produce well over 1 million. I think it can produce, in fact, close to 2 million vehicles. And I think there are only 1,000 people. Now the two things are not comparable because that's just a plant. This had corporate staff also. The make-buy has changed, automation has changed. But the point is, look at the difference, 23,000 versus 1,000. And not even 1 million versus perhaps 1.5, 2 million. So that was the scope to improve productivity. There was a similar scope to improve quality by a similar magnitude, to improve technology, to improve automation. All of that was there. Mr. Jain used to always tell me, you have to stand on your own feet. And Dr. Wallace said the same thing in a different way to me. These sentences I will never forget. He told me only once, in a certain context of a work we were doing in the press shop. He said, don't defend the past, attack the future. And today when we have made a bold move with the electric Chetak, for example, when everybody knows that electric vehicles are not viable, you lose money, and there are so many anxieties around them. But I will never forget this lesson, because I have learned the hard way that Bajaj Auto missed two big buses in the 80s. One was the automatic scooter, where Kinetic Honda did so well, and we've lost out on that market completely. And the second was the 100cc motorcycle, where Hero Honda did so well. And I've learned the hard way that in this market, what matters more than anything else is the first mover's advantage. Because if you're first to market with something, for which apparently there is no market. All my dealers used to tell me, "Ye Hero Honda ki gaadi to kabhi nahi bikegi." That's why till today, not in a bad sense, but I tell my marketing and sales people till today, dealer opinion counts for nothing. Because as my marketing guru Jack Trout always told me, people buy what other people buy. The dealer only talks about herd mentality. He's not going to have the heart to bet on differentiation. So you have to start something new. You have to create products that create segments. And when you don't do that and you are late to market, then you are only seen as a clone. And that taught me that it is better to try and fail for being wrong than not to try, because the cost of being wrong is very small. The cost of being late is huge. Probably Bajaj Auto, in my estimate ones, has lost 30,000-40,000 crores of rupees that it would have made if instead of Hero Honda, we would have made the 100cc 4-stroke motorcycle first. When we made the Pulsar first, when we made the three-wheeler first, when we made the scooter almost first. See, we are not really in an industry which is driven by technology. Because if you look at a car today versus a car 20 years back, there's not much that's different. The first electric car was put together more than 100 years ago. Electric scooters, I mean, a TVS made an electric scooty 15 years ago in this country. So I would still argue that it's more of an evolution than a revolution. And in that sense, it is very important to be there first. Now, one doesn't have to take it literally. I mean, for example, I would say we are an early starter with the electric scooter. I don't think we are late with that. Now, TVS may have done something 15 years back which faded away for whatever reason. Ather, of course, has done very well in the last couple of years, etc. The problem is when you have a mature competitor like Honda come with Hero and you come out with something 10 years after that. Nobody's interested. Because there is not enough elbow room in technology to make something far superior. The problem with engineers is they only think in terms of better. Engineers think like this, that if somebody gives you 10 kilometers a liter and I give you 11, you should buy me. But it doesn't happen, because for 1 kilometer a liter, consumers are not willing, the herd is not willing to shift. So knowing the difference between what is better and what is different is intrinsic to marketing. That is how I learned the importance of being first to market. And in that context, Dr. Wallace used to tell me that you must attack the future, don't defend the past. Yamaguchi-san, I mean, my most important business lesson perhaps, and I've told this story many times, about what is your job. And I could never answer the question. He kept asking me, what is your job? I kept telling him my designation. He would say, that's your designation, what is your job? And I would say, I do this. Then he said, do you actually design? I said, no. Do you actually make? No. Do you actually sell? No. He said, then you are just overhead. What is your job? This conversation took place sitting here, at this very place. And then he told me that people like you who sit up in the corporate hierarchy, you fellows don't do anything with your own hands. And this is true of all people who are not doing anything with their own hands. I always tell my people that if you're Mahendra Singh Dhoni, you have to still slog it out. If you're a great surgeon, you have to still bend over 9 hours doing the surgery yourself. And if you're a painter, you have no choice but to paint. But we are the only people, the so-called managers, we are the only category of people who have to do nothing. You sit in an air-conditioned room, you drink your coffee, you look at the PPT, you sign a few papers, and you do blah blah all day long. This is all you do. So then he told me that this is not your job. He used to always say, you think only talking is your job. Then he said, no, talking is not your job, improvement is your job. He taught me then that you have to always have this mindset of improvement. And you have to go to work every day telling yourself, you will improve something today. And by the end of the day, you should feel that you have done that. So at least if you improve one thing every day. And I think that is the success of the Japanese. That is the culture of the Japanese. And I would like to believe that that's the kind of culture we are developing or enabling in Bajaj Auto, where everybody who comes to work must feel that I have improved something. Because, we used to always get this question in those days when we pushed for productivity improvement, etc., which culminated with a big VRS here, a big thing, getting rid of so many people. And the standard question used to always be, which initially I was never able to answer, what's in it for me? So the workman or the supervisor will say, "Mera to pagar utna hi hai," so my future is not any more assured. You are not saying because of this you will employ my son. But the answer came to me again in 2017 May from Dr. Rajan, when again in a certain context he told me the true reward for man's toil is not what he gets for it, but what he becomes because of it. So each person has to experience that for himself, that whatever I am doing, if I do it by attacking the future, if I do it so that it is world class, if I do it in a manner that exhibits continuous improvement, what is it that it does to me? I think you can reflect and you can sense what it does to you. I think that is the true reward, because that is something that money cannot buy, so to speak. So I was not wise enough to give them this answer that time. But in recent years, this is the answer I give them. That you ask yourself, are you the same person you were when you were doing that and now you are doing this? And then people understand. A labor dispute has to be sorted out in the chambers of Bal Thackeray. But I remember we were taken there, I remember the house. A lot of our workmen, union people were outside. Then we were taken inside. And there are, I would say, stories in two parts. So one part is that apparently when Bal Thackeray came to Mumbai, and when he was a quote-unquote nobody initially, so my grand-uncle Ramkrishan ji apparently had taken a liking to him for whatever that cartoon business and all, whatever he used to do. And he kind of supported him in some fashion, I'm not sure how. So Bal Thackeray always had great regard, respect and affection for him and therefore for the family. So it was very clear that he was not going to be rough with us. But at the same time, it was his union. So, and he was obviously the big boss. My father was not the big boss in that room that day, it was him. So he was going to call it. So it was very nice to see how the dynamics played out. And it was a good training for me, because I asked myself 20 times, what will I do in such a situation? I don't want to agree because they have beaten up my people. I got very emotional about it because some of my supervisors got beaten up, etc. There was violence. So people have to lose their job. And there was one particularly troublesome character. And at that time, my attitude as a young person was, he has done this, he should be sacked. He should be punished. That was my attitude. And I had told my father very clearly, you can't step back from this. So my father had tried very hard to tell them here that this time he's also dug his heels in, etc., etc. But obviously a union will not allow somebody to be sacked. And he was a union leader, senior person. So that's why there was a stalemate and we have to go to the power center or to the remote control or whatever it was. So I was asking myself, now what will my father do? Because if Bal Thackeray says no, it means that's the end of it then. So my father was very clever. So he told Bal Thackeray that he gave him the background and all, ऐसा ऐसा हो गया and all. अभी ये भी ऐसा बोलते हैं, आपके लोग भी ऐसा बोलते हैं. तो मैं एक काम करता हूँ. These are the keys of the gate. I give you the keys. You only manage the company now. Because I can't do it. on the one hand, it's like devil and deep blue sea. This son of mine also won't relent. The whatever unrelenting force met the irresistible force met the unrelenting object. And your fellows also won't listen. So ye chavi aap rakh lo. So very cleverly he got out of that situation. Bal Thackeray sitting there nicely. And something happened. He offered how he changes the subject. He said, "Aap stress mat lo. Beer lenge kya?" So my father was quite surprised. It was middle of the day. It was about lunchtime. So my father says, "Nahi." And my father generally doesn't drink at all, and certainly not in the day. So he said, "Nahi, I don't drink." And he never used to drink beer, I think. So Bal Thackeray said, "Aap beer nahi peete?" So I'm thinking this is like a labor negotiation going on here. So he says, "नहीं." देखिए फिर इसीलिए आपको इतना लाइफ में टेंशन है, फिर हेल्थ प्रॉब्लम भी होगा बाद में वगैरह। बियर पीना बहुत ज़रूरी है, सब प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो जाते हैं, like this he went on. So he lightened the whole thing, And then he gestured to some of his people in the room. I remember some names of some of the senior ones, but I don't want to say them because some of them are ministers now. And he said, "So has that person done what this boy is saying?" He pointed to me. Have they really beaten up that fellow like that? And is he a repeat offender like that? So they said yes, that it is. Kadun taka tela. Off with his head in one sentence. So they were all shocked. So this power of being decisive, it suited me, so I was for it. But I saw this, that, I think today's times, the politicians we have and all, they are not decisive actually, And that is why we have also ended up with some of the people that we have. So how to be decisive? Not that, one person can usurp the discipline of the party or something like this. I mean, here was a leader who was very fair, very open. He has given time, he has invited the feedback. But then he is able to stand up and do the right thing. And he said, out. And he told my father. And yet how he did it with the velvet glove. He told us, you give him one auto rickshaw free of cost. Because with the auto rickshaw, you can start earning tomorrow. So he said that his family should not suffer. You give him auto rickshaw free of cost. So from tomorrow, if he's willing to work 8 hours a day, he has to stop beating up people and all, he can start earning, and then the matter is over. So this is a big lesson to me that, from where this solution has been plucked out is so contra-intuitive, so unusual. The way my father made his case clear with absolute respect in front of a fellow who everybody feared. And yet that person, how he lightened it and brought everybody around to the correct decision. They were very remarkable for me. And by the time we came out, there was celebration actually. All the people, they were putting garlands on my father's car, offering us laddus, bursting crackers, all this great Indian tamasha.